quick disclaimer. Sorry. Just a quick disclaimer that I have COVID at the moment, so if I'm croaky or have to stop for that's why. Climbing the walls in isolation. I'm just going to, so just to give you a little heads up on what's coming up tonight, I'm going to talk a little bit about who I am, though Malcolm's introduced me very nicely there, thank you. Talk a bit about the inspiration for the challenge, why I decided to do it, what my sort of planning stages were and the approach for it. I'm going to focus in on quite a few of the Herts and Middlesex boroughs of London, and then just do a quick summary at the end. So who am I? As Malcolm said, I'm a nature reserves officer working for London Wildlife Trust for the best part of the last 3 years on the Brilliant Butterflies project, which, as Malcolm said, it's a partnership project with Butterfly Conservation and the Natural History Museum, and it focuses on restoring the chalk grassland habitats that are across Croydon and Bromley. So hopefully you'll be able to join for the talk in March, where I'll update you on everything that the project has achieved. It's meant that I have spent a lot of time in the last couple of years on some of the most butterfly rich areas of London, so in particular places like Hutchinson's Bank, which is in New Addington, a really wonderful place to see a whole number of species, up to sort of 40 different species you can see there. And I've also put there that I'm a newcomer. As of about 3 or 4 years ago, I didn't know anything about butterflies, could probably only name maybe 2 or 3 different species confidently. So I'm certainly no expert, and so it was a big part of the challenge, was trying to inspire the people of London to get out into their local green spaces and to see what butterflies they could find, and see what a joy it was to try and find them, and how easy that could be. When the more you look, the more you see. All my photos and videos are all done just using my phone. I don't have any of that kind of specialist equipment, so it really is something that's accessible to everyone. So the inspiration behind the challenge, probably about around this time last year, coming out of lockdown, this was a fairly accurate representation of me, feeling very sort of lacking in motivation, and like a lot of people I know, had a pretty tough time in the lockdowns, and felt like I needed a challenge to get me out there, a reason to get out and about. And so I was reflecting on a talk given by Simon Saville, who's the chair of Surrey and South West London Butterfly Conservation, and he was talking about the successes of London's butterflies, how although butterflies nationally are in decline, that London can be considered a bit of a success story, that there's several species that are have increased in distribution and abundance in the city in the last few decades. So in combination with that, and looking at this book, which was produced in the 1980s by Colin Plant, about the butterflies of London at that point in time, when there was 22 breeding species in the inner London boroughs, the 12 inner London boroughs, and that now it's quite a different story. There's quite a few more species that are resident within those inner London boroughs. So that in combination with Patrick Barkham's wonderful book, The Butterfly Isles, which was charted his journey, his quest to see all the British butterfly species across Britain in one summer. And that was a big inspiration, the kind of treasure hunt aspect that I mentioned before, about trying to replicate that in London, and see one in each of the 33 boroughs, and just try and see how much of a success story London's butterflies had become, just how diverse they were, as well as having the kind of opportunity to get out and see different green spaces. So this is the area we're dealing with. This is London in all its glory. There's 32 official boroughs of London, and then the slight anomaly that I've highlighted here in red, which is the City of London. Sometimes it's considered a borough, sometimes it's a borough. I decided to include it in the challenge because the biggest reason being that 33 makes a much nicer butterfly shape as a logo than 32 would have done. So it made sense to include it, even though it upped my numbers for the boroughs in total. And just to give you an idea of scale, it's about 45 miles across from the edge of Hillingdon to the edge of Havering. So a significant area to be sort of covering in one summer. And this pink line, which I'll refer back to quite a bit throughout the talk, this is the 12 inner London boroughs, so those ones that were mentioned in Colin Plant's book, where there were 22 breeding species throughout the 1980s. And then this gold line just represents the boroughs that are covered by Herts and Middlesex butterfly conservation. So they've got the lion's share of London, really. London is split up into 4 different BC branches, but Herts and Middlesex covers the most boroughs. So you can see there it's quite a significant chunk of the city. I'll be honest and say that before I did the challenge, I had no idea that there was 33 boroughs or 32 official boroughs in London. I certainly couldn't have named maybe half of them. I didn't know where they were. So I figured that even if I didn't see all the butterflies I was hoping to, that I would have upskilled my London geography for the city I've lived in for the best part of 9 years, and that I'd have a better idea. And at least I would have visited. I could have renamed it 33 boroughs rather than 33 butterflies. So I started my research early last year, looking at sort of scouring transect data, looking at the UK Butterfly Monitoring Service and historical records, and decided that the best approach was just to visit each of the boroughs and try and see as many butterflies as I could while I was there, and then worry about trying to figure it out into one per borough towards the end of the challenge, because that seemed like a better approach than trying to assign a butterfly to each borough ahead of schedule and trying to go and see a specific one. So I was working full time and trying to sort of fit this in around that. So it meant that I focused my search for green spaces on those sort of borderland areas, so I could go and see 2 or 3 within one foul sweep. So I could go and that was hopefully going to make it easier. And so by mid-March, I'd got this massive spreadsheet of information, like all the different areas I was going to visit. I was feeling super motivated and really enthusiastic about it. And then in late March, we had this beautiful weather. If you can cast your minds back, it was glorious temperatures. I think we got to about 24 degrees here in Lambeth, and it was super sunny. So I thought, this is going to be the best butterfly year ever. It's going to be easy to see all these. And then of course we had April, which was the coldest since 1922. And the seeds of doubt started to creep in a bit, but I gave myself a talking to and said, this is just all the bad weather out of the way early, it's going to be fine. After the beast from the east in 2018, we had a great butterfly year, so it's fine. And then we had May, which was the wettest since records began. So I didn't have best of starts, it has to be said, for the challenge. But that said, there was some little chinks of light, and this was one of the only sunny days in May that I managed to get out onto my one of my first official hunts to try and find butterflies, and went to the heart of the city of London, and to the sort of pocket green spaces around that area. It's, as you saw from that map, it's quite a tiny area, so there's no big green space park. So I knew it was going to be quite a tricky place to see butterflies, but there's lots of these little pockets of green space around St Paul's Cathedral, Postman's Park, and walking around the raised walkways of the Barbican estate is a really lovely place to just walk around, and it's so rich in history. You've got the sort of ancient walls, Roman walls that were surrounding Londinium, like right next to the brutalist architecture of the Barbican from the 1960s and 70s. It's a really nice place to walk around regardless of butterflies. So I was wandering around. It was still quite chilly even at that point in May, so I hadn't seen any, and then luckily stumbled across this, which is a green wall at Wall Place that was covered in wallflowers, and this beautiful peacock pristine peacock was there, sort of quintessential butterfly. I like to think, I think it's probably the most recognisable one for people in the UK, and it was just balanced perfectly. I think I did a little jump for joy that I'd managed to kick things off. And I thought at that point that I would see lots of peacocks throughout the challenge. I thought they'd probably be one of the most populous ones I'd see. But actually I only saw them in 9 of the 33 boroughs. It was only present in 9, and as we mentioned earlier, that nationally the peacocks were down 63%. I understand from the Herts and Middlesex that that's not reflected, but they actually had a pretty good year. But perhaps that's when the big butterfly count happened, that they were 63% down at the point. But as we've said before, it could be that it was the cold April meant that we had these sort of early butterflies coming out, and then there wasn't enough flowering for them. That's meant that they didn't have enough nectar to be able to feed and breed. But that's just kind of speculation. Just thinking about the butterflies in the peacocks within London. So this diagram here, I'll use quite a few of these throughout the talk. This diagram on the left is taken straight from that Colin Plant book from the 1980s. So those orange dots are records of peacocks, and that is London. The pink line again is the inner London boroughs, kind of representing those. So you can see how widespread the peacock records were for the outer London boroughs and the surrounding areas, and then those inner London boroughs, it's not recorded very much at all. And fast forward to the situation, this is taken from iRecord in 2019 to 2021. You can see it's somewhat reversed in that the inner London boroughs, there's far more records for the peacocks, but particularly in the north London but outer London boroughs, there's far fewer records. So it's kind of a tale of two halves really with the peacocks in London. It's likely that the inner London boroughs are seeing more numbers due to this heat island effect, that the inner London boroughs are much warmer. The green spaces that are there are quite stable. There's no kind of impacts from agricultural pesticides or anything like that. So that's perhaps why their numbers are increasing within those areas. So moving on to a green space that was a new green space for me, but one that's already been mentioned today. I know it's close to several people's hearts who are here tonight, and that's Horsenden Hill, which is in Ealing. It's a really wonderful site, 100-hectare sites, got ancient woodland, meadows, wetlands, and I actually visited as part of a butterfly conservation walk with David Howden, who's an expert on the site. And you would have thought that by sort of the 27th of June that we might have been more or less guaranteed of some nice sunny weather. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case, as was with many days at that time. It was quite cool and quite cloudy, but nevertheless, our small little group that had gathered ploughed ahead, and we were rewarded with several sightings of the white leather hairstreak, which is the butterfly that's in the top left of the screen here. Usually within the treetops, elm trees are its favourites, and we saw it in several places. We saw it flitting around, as well as a few quite slow moving marbled whites and skippers who were out in the grassland areas as well. The Gruffalo here is just because they have a lovely Gruffalo trail for children. If you ever want to visit that and have a walk around with children, it's really lovely. It's a great site for butterflies in general. If you ever get a chance to go, if you haven't been already, I know they've got 2 transects on site where they regularly get sort of 25 species between the two. And as has been mentioned already, it looks like it's going to be a hotspot for brown hairstreak adults next August and September, as they've had record numbers of brown hairstreak eggs recorded. And I think it was the first time they'd seen adults. Last summer was the first time adults. No, it was the first time David Howden, who was leading our talk, was the first time he had seen adults on the site. So yeah, it's a really great site if you can get there. Just to say a bit more about the white letter hairstreaks in London, they are a bit of a success story. You can see here again this diagram from the 1980s where very kind of sporadic, few and far between records for the white letter hairstreak, and only one within inner London. I think that's Battersea Park, where they were recorded at that time. Fast forward again to today, kind of the numbers haven't increased massively, but there's still a lot more records and quite a lot more within those inner London areas. So some of that's Horsenden Hill there, that first circle. The second one there is Burgess Park, which is a really wonderful park in Southwark, a true urban park. Lots of money has gone and time and effort has gone into making that park a really special place for butterflies. I've got oodles of wonderful wildflower meadows, so it's really worth a visit if you're ever in the area. And they have some elm trees that are a stronghold for white letter hairstreak. This at the bottom here is my stomping ground, Streatham Common. We have a strong population of white letter hairstreaks on some mature elm trees on Streatham Common. And there's actually some very urban in Vauxhall Pleasure Gardens and Millbank, which is those in the middle there. So it is becoming an increasingly, you're more increasingly likely to see it within the city now, which is great. So moving on to a couple of country parks I visited. I think this was mentioned a bit earlier as well. This is Fryent Country Park, which is in Brent, and it's kind of a true urban country park, I would say. But you can see from this aerial photo like how surrounded it is by residents and industrial estates, and it's got this main road running through it, but actually it has a really rural feel to it. You can see from this picture the sort of hedgerows crisscrossing all over the site, and once you're within the park you don't have to get too far in, and it really kind of immerses you within this nature and feels like quite a rural environment. And it's, you know, within a couple of hours while I was there, I saw 12 different butterfly species, including purple hairstreaks, marbled whites, the comma, which was pictured here on the right, which became the tick for Brent for that country park. And there was loads of meadow browns all over the site, as you might expect. And I've put two down here. The one on the right hand side was a real pale example that really kind of stood out. The kind of aberrations within the meadow browns are quite common, but this one just looked like it had sort of flown off an old-fashioned sepia photo and really quite different to all those around it. And I'm just going to show you just a little. I got very into doing slow-mo videos of butterflies during the challenge, because it really gave a chance to kind of look at the different flight patterns of the butterflies, because you get a real chance to kind of see it. So I've just got one of my favorite videos. It was actually filmed, it wasn't filmed in Fryent Country Park, it was filmed here in South London, but just any excuse to show it. So hopefully it's going to play for you. If you keep your eyes on the top of the video to start with, hopefully you should be able to see an incoming visitor. This was all just filmed on my phone. It was just these chance interactions that I really enjoyed about the challenge. Like, it was just, I just happened to be filming one of the meadow browns before this other visitor came in, and the little fly. So it was just that one of the things about the challenge was that because of the approach I was doing of trying to see as many butterflies in each borough, it meant that there was never just a meadow brown. I was always pleased to see whatever butterfly was there. It was valued. So it led to kind of a new appreciation. Another country park not too far away from Brent is Stanmore Country Park in Harrow, and it was a new site for me, and I went there on the same day actually as Fryent Country Park. I had to make the most of the sunny warm days, so it was like get up at dawn if I knew it was going to be sunny and warm, and try and get to as many places as possible. So these two were a double whammy. Country Park and the wood farm area kind of next to each other, and this picture in the top left is of a viewpoint that's in the wood farm area, which is next to Stanmore Country Park, and it's a really stunning viewpoint. You can see, like in the photo there, you can see sort of the arch of Wembley, which is one of the nearer things you can see, because you can see all the way to the river, the Shard, and the other sort of Canary Wharf, and all the skyscrapers along the river, and then even further on a clear day you can see out to Croydon and Crystal Palace Tower. So really is an amazing viewpoint. I would definitely recommend a visit. It was once a farm, hence the name Wood Farm, and then it was a landfill site, and was previously inaccessible to the public. And then only in 2012 it was handed over to the council, and a small part of it was sold off for building work, and then the proceeds of that were used to turn it into this sort of amazing green space that it is today. And they've, you know, spent a lot of money and sort of creating these wildflower mounds and meadows around the area. And the day I visited, it was absolutely chock-a-block with these marbled whites on the right here, and skippers enjoying all the bird's-foot trefoil, the oxeye daisies, the knapweed. It was really, really alive with butterflies and wildflowers. And I managed to see 11 species while I was there. So across those two real urban country parks, that was 15 species in a day. So a pretty good haul for a day. Just to say a bit more about the marbled whites, they really are a London success story in terms of their abundance and distribution. You can see here this diagram again from the 1980s, no records from inner London, and only very few from the outer London boroughs, mostly within Croydon and Bromley, which are those orange dots at the bottom there. Although it has to be said that in Colin Plant's book, he has mentioned that marbled whites were regularly released in the New Addington area. So it's possible that those releases by certain individuals they might be responsible for the picture of the marbled whites that we see today, which is far more abundant and present in a lot of London boroughs, and very present within the inner London boroughs. So it's had a real success story within London. And we've got again, that's Burgess Park that I've just highlighted there in Southwark. We've got Brompton Cemetery, another very urban area that I'll talk a bit more about in a moment. Tower Hamlets Cemetery Park, and Regent's Park. So these are all sites that have put time and effort and money into providing pollinator habitats. So it really is kind of a testament of like, build it and they will come. Like these, where the effort has been put in, the butterflies are there, and butterflies like the marbled white are really, really responding to that kind of input. Okay, so I mentioned Brompton Cemetery there, and I just wanted to talk a bit more about cemeteries in general. They're a different kind of green space in London, but a really valuable one. They are stable environments, they're largely pesticide free, and lots of them are now being managed for nature. And they're a real oasis for urban nature. Across London, we have the Magnificent Seven cemeteries, which sprung up in the 19th century to alleviate overcrowding in the parish cemeteries. So we've got Brompton, West Norwood, Nunhead, Abney Park, Highgate, Kensal Green, and Tower Hamlets. And kind of set myself a bit of a side challenge to the butterfly challenge of trying to visit all of these, just to have a look at the different habitats that they were offering, and just to compare the cemeteries. Managed to get to all of them last summer, apart from Kensal Green. So almost the Magnificent Six, and they really are a fantastic place to go and see wildlife in general, but butterfly absolutely. And I'll just show you this. There's a extremely large cemetery that's not part of the Magnificent Seven, called City Cemetery, which is out in Newham, which has large areas that are managed with wildlife in mind, so the older areas of the cemetery. And we were mentioning about painted ladies earlier, and I saw several at City Cemetery, but this one posed quite nicely for a little slow-mo video. Very delicate flyers. It was all the cemeteries were also a place where I saw this butterfly in the middle here, one of my favourites, the green hairstreak. They're doing a little wing wiggle. It was also somewhere, the cemeteries were a place where I saw a lot of green hairstreaks as well, because there's often birdsfoot trefoil and that kind of favoured food plant of them. And this photo on the right hand side is a chalk maze that's been created at Tower Hamlets Cemetery Park, where they've put a lot of effort into trying to create pollinator friendly habitats. They have a sort of sporadic small blue population. They have a lot of kidney vetch there, and so they have sometimes, some years they have small blues. So it's hopefully they will become more of a resident population. So I really would recommend a trip out to these cemeteries. I think Highgate is the only one you have to pay to go into, but it's really worth a trip in. They've got some really unusual headstones and lovely pockets for wildlife. And some might think it's a bit macabre and that the cemeteries are full of death. I would wholeheartedly disagree. I think they're full of life and they're full of love, and you just got to read a few of the headstones and it can renew your faith in humankind. So I would definitely recommend a visit to those if you haven't already. Okay. Moving on from cemeteries to one of my favourite spots of the challenge. So this white admirals are quite a London rarity. They were scarce in the 1980s, as you can see from the diagram here on the left, and they are still pretty scarce now. But there is a stronghold, which is highlighted here in yellow, and that's Ruislip Woods in Hillingdon. It was recommended to me by several people, including Malcolm, as a place to go and see, to try and see white admirals. So as soon as records started popping up on Twitter that they'd been seen on the site, I headed straight there to see if I would be lucky enough to catch sight of one. And it's not, I'd never been to Ruislip Woods before, but I absolutely loved it. It's such a wonderful place. It's the largest single area of woodland in Greater London. It's one of the most extensive ancient semi-natural woodlands in England. It's got these distinct areas, some of which have got amazing names like Mad Bess Wood and Grub Ground. It's even got its own like miniature railway, so it really is a very special place. It's over 755 acres, so I was very pleased to have Twitter tip-offs on where to head to try and see the white admirals. And so I went to the exact spot that I'd been recommended by one of the trustees of the wood. It wasn't too far away from these cattle. It was a roasting hot day, surprisingly. There hasn't been many of them. And I spent about 90 minutes pacing up and down in this field in front of the bramble bushes, looking at the honeysuckle, which is where the white admirals will lay their eggs. And thinking, they've got to be here some, my heart in my mouth every time I saw another butterfly, and there was lots around that time of year. But alas, they remained hidden. So I quite literally flounced off into the woods, more to seek shade than for anything else, and thought I'll have an explore around the woods anyway while I'm here. They've got a real magical quality to them, the woodlands. All these massive ancient oak trees and like sinewy kind of hornbeams, and really nice to walk around. And I sort of got very lucky when I walked into the glade where there'd been a couple of fallen trees, and happened to turn around, and this beautiful white admiral glided down onto one of the nearby bramble bushes. And it's this individual down here on the left hand side, and I was just, heart in mouth kind of moment. I think I did a little jump of glee. And they've got such a graceful flight. They're like a tropical butterfly. They're not like any other British butterfly, I don't think. They're just really beautiful. And before long, it was joined by my favourite butterfly, the silver wash fritillary, which is this other butterfly here in the middle. So I just perched on a fallen tree and watched them dance around for quite some time. It was really lovely. I've just got a little video that's not my video, but just to kind of gives you a bit more of an idea of the white admirals and their very dainty beauty. So if you haven't managed to see a white admiral, I would definitely recommend Ruislip Woods. I can let you know the exact location of the glade I saw them, and they might be there again next year. So another butterfly that I had hoped I might see in Ruislip Woods was the purple emperor, because they have them on site, and but I didn't see one. So I went to see purple emperors in several places around the city. You can see here in the 1980s there weren't many records at all. Today there's not loads of records, but there's more than there were. And Matthew Oates, who wrote the amazing book about purple emperors, his Imperial Majesty, he describes purple emperors as a true London butterfly. So I had hoped to see them in Ruislip Woods there, which is where I saw the white admiral. I'd also went to Totteridge Green in Barnet, where I knew I didn't see any there. Went to Hampstead Heath, where they have them. I didn't see any there. And then I went to Putney Heath in Wandsworth, where I managed to get very lucky. I did have to turn into a bit of a stalker to secure a sighting of His Majesty. I was scouring Twitter during their flight period to see different records, and I came across a post by Les Evans-Hill, who's a data manager for BC, and he's also heavily involved in the National Moth Recorder scheme. And he'd had a purple emperor in his back garden. His garden backs onto Putney Heath. So thankfully he didn't mind me sliding into his DMs to ask him where he lived. And he also didn't mind when I popped my head over his garden fence for a chat when I was lurking around in and around his back garden. And he gave me several tips on several places to see the purple emperor around Putney Heath. I spent about an hour sort of wandering around, and then saw a butterfly that I didn't immediately recognise, kind of fluttering on a path that was, there was quite a few people, ladies with buggies and dog walkers, and so I sort of crept closer, hoping before I got close enough to realise that it was a purple emperor. I sort of took a quick photo and thought that would be it, that I might just get a record shot, that would be my my interaction with a purple emperor for the challenge. And then magically it fluttered down underneath this huge beech tree. I've just got this little video where we spent about 20 minutes nose to nose while he probed the soil for salts, completely unfazed by my presence or any of the other passers-by. Just, yeah, completely at ease. It was a very, very special moment. You can hear the people in the background. It was quite a busy day, and as I say, I was trying to shoo away dogs that kept kind of come sniffing around me as I was watching him. And yeah, it was a good moment. And after he flew off, I was absolutely fizzing with excitement. I was by myself, so I really wanted to just shout and tell people, and most people wouldn't have known what I was talking about, but I just happened to see two gentlemen walking past, one of whom had a butterfly transect sheet in his hand, and I was like, some of my people, let me go and tell them about my exciting find. So I kind of chased after them, having already been a stalker in Les's garden, and now I was running after these people to say, no, I've just seen a purple emperor. And it was very nice to share, and they were very obliging listening to my exciting news. They hadn't seen any purple emperors, but they had seen clouded yellows that same morning, so they were able to direct me to where the clouded yellows had been seen. So not long after seeing a purple emperor, I then got to see clouded yellows, which thankfully were across the borough border into a different borough on Wimbledon Common in Merton. So managed to get two amazing species in two boroughs in one morning. So yeah, it really was quite special. not in Herts and Middlesex, but I just really like sharing those those sightings. So, just got a couple more places. My challenge was sort of coming to an end after I'd seen the White Admiral and the Clouded Yellow and the Purple Emperor. I was thinking I'm definitely going, I'm going to be able to complete the challenge. And we had the amazing weather in July, and then we'll start to get cold and gloomy again, and I wasn't sure. I had a few boroughs left to go, so I had Enfield was one of my final boroughs, and what should have been a lovely sunny August bank holiday was a cold and grey bank holiday again. But White Weds Wood and Park was another really great green space to visit. It's a mixture of sort of ancient woodland, open, rough grassland, makes it perfect for wildlife. It's also one of several places that I visited that used to be a golf course that's now let nature kind of take over, and it's amazing how quickly nature can take over. In Lewisham, Beckenham Place Park is another example where it was a golf course, and now it's been given over to nature, and it really makes a huge difference. So on this sort of very cloudy day, I did manage to see 8 species, including the lovely obliging speckled wood, who you can always rely on a cloudy day, and purple hairstreak, which became the tick for Enfield. And as an added bonus, managed to see this grass snake, which is on the bottom left here. I didn't see many reptiles throughout the challenge, so this was a real nice treat. It was also a site where I was fairly sure I'd seen a brown hairstreak flutter out that was disturbed by a pigeon, but because they've not had records there before, and there wasn't anyone else around, I couldn't in good conscience count it as part of my challenge. So I had to wait a bit longer for the final piece of my butterfly puzzle. And that came a couple of days later, and we suddenly had some lovely sunny days at the beginning of September, and I had a tip off from Bill Downey, who's the transit coordinator for Surrey and South West London. He recommended Tolworth Court Farms, sent me a Google pin, and almost in the exact spot that he had sent the pin, I managed to see a brown hairstreak. And then amazingly, I happened to be walking home past Tooting Common, which is this picture here with the road, the next day, and there was another brown hairstreak fluttering about in and around the road, just completely oblivious. So it was another really great sort of urban sighting. I know the brown hairstreaks, we've mentioned them already today, have had a really good year. There've been lots of sightings in places where they haven't been before. So they are certainly starting to be a success story. Those populations suffered due to hedgerow removals, not enough young blackthorn for the egg laying. And you can see here in the 1980s, no inner London records at all, and only a couple for the outer London boroughs. And then fast forward, and you can kind of see this army of brown hairstreaks coming up from the south. So lots of records within outer London boroughs, and several starting to appear in these inner London boroughs. So a real London success story for the brown hairstreaks, hopefully to continue. So I'm just going to give a little summary now. So in total, I saw 38 species of butterfly. 27 of those were in inner London boroughs. Visited over 60 green spaces, woodlands, wetlands, meadows, parks, cemeteries. Most of them were new to me. I wrote a blog about a lot of the places that I visited. I'm still adding to it now, and had lots of nice feedback of people going to visit the places that I'd written about. So that was really wonderful. I also got a real eye-opener to the wonderful butterfly community. Like, what a great bunch we are. Everyone was so supportive and interested, and there's certainly a lot of the species I wouldn't have seen without the tips and the help that I had from everyone. And Twitter was invaluable, like just with providing sightings and people helping me out. I've put here one of my favourite life mantras, which is motivation follows action. And that was certainly true for a lot of days on the challenge, where perhaps I didn't feel like wanting to go out, not wanting to do any sort of butterfly hunting, and then I was always glad that I did go. Doing something makes you want to do it more, and that was certainly true for this challenge. The last thing there I've put is luck, because there certainly is a lot of luck involved in butterfly spotting, and I have spent my whole life looking for four-leaf clovers. Pretty much every patch I walk past, I look for four-leaf clovers, because I just think that's, again, it's that treasure hunt aspect. And I never found them. And then this year I found two. I found one in Bedford in the week before I saw the Purple Emperor, the Clouded Yellow, and the White Admiral. And then this one in the picture here, I found in Finsbury Park a few days before I finished the challenge. So I don't know if you believe in that kind of thing, but I like to think it has something to do with it. So this is them. This is the 33, and I can't wait for butterfly season to start again this year and explore even more of London's green spaces, and hopefully you'll all be able to get out and explore some of them too, and maybe do your own butterfly challenges. And that's my blog site just on the bottom there, if anyone would like to read about some of the spaces I went to, and that's my Twitter handle if anyone wants to follow me. I am fairly quiet during the winter, and then come butterfly season, that's all I can talk about. So thank you very much for listening to my talk today, and I'm very happy to answer any questions.
Great, well, thanks, Anna. That's a fascinating talk. I suppose my first question was, well, what's your challenge going to be this year?
I know everyone's been asking that. Well, I think I think I'm going to try and do the London Loop and the Capital Ring. Maybe not both this year, but certainly one of them, do butterflies of the London Loop and the Capital Ring. And so to try and just do them section by section by there, and maybe include something moth related as well. But I haven't decided on that yet. Yeah,
well, if it goes well, we'll look forward to another talk next year.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Now, would anyone else like to ask a question? And if you want, don't know if you want to, if you can unmute and maybe take your video off, then do feel free to wave or just ask away. Who have we got? Christine.
Yes, I was just wondering how you travelled around London to the different sites.
Public transport wherever I could. So yeah, train, tube, bus, tram in the south of London. Some of the outside, I think some of the North London, when I was in Bedford for quite a bit of last year. So I did head down the M1 in a car for a couple of them. But most, I think it was only, a couple that were by car. Most of them it was public transport.
It's good to know that you can do it.
Yes, yeah, surprisingly, like even like places I'd never, like sort of the Far East, in Barking and Dagenham, which is somewhere I'd never been before, and it's amazing how far you can get in not an unreasonable amount of time. If you kind of plan a suitable route, you can get most places. And I would tend to just do one kind of train or journey and then walk. Like I'd spend the whole day walking, so wherever possible I would kind of cross borough borders with walking. That was my preference, was to walk as much of it as possible. Lots of.
Okay, thanks.
Right. Has anyone else got a question they'd like to ask Anna?
I've got a question about the white letter hair streak. There's a site near where I live, and they've been recorded there, and I've been to that site for many, many years, and I've never seen them. So I just wondered, what were they doing when you actually saw them? How did you see them?
They're in the very kind of tops of the elm tree. I'm assuming it's elm trees.
Yeah.
And they do move very fast, but they'll flip between. If you look, the easiest thing I found, means other people might have suggestions as well, but look for a gap in wherever there's a gap between sort of two bushier branches, and they tend to move very quickly between the two, between the gaps. So
okay,
the only time I've only seen them sort of at ground level a couple of times, like the picture that I showed there was when I'd seen it one at ground level, but most of the sightings, certainly in Streatham, the ones that I see, it's if I have to lay on the grass for and look at the gaps.
Right, okay, so look up and I'll keep going back. I'll keep trying. I'll try again this year.
Chris, whereabouts are you? Where's your
in Basingstoke?
Basingstoke. Right. Timing's also important in the day. If you want to catch the males up high up, they are quite early risers.
Right,
they
okay.
tend to stop for lunch, so most people turn up at lunchtime, and they're having their break. Then.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Check the timing.
I should bear that in mind.
Yeah.
Thank you. I
would say when I look for them, I'd go for a sunny sort of morning. Towards the end of June, mid-June. Usually look on the website and see if other people have been seeing it first. That's usually a good indication. But just look for like little black triangles attacking each other high above the elm. You can look at the elm and look through binoculars, but that's quite slow and painstaking. But actually, when the males clash with each other, they sort of whiz about, and I mean you can't really see the markings on them. But if it's little black triangles, then it can't be anything else. But earlier in the morning is usually better. I mean, sometimes low down on, I suppose, thistles or brambles are probably the best, most likely flowers, but
there's a lot of brambles around the edge of the wood.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for that. Lots of tips. I'll go back again this summer.
Yeah, Christine.
And just to comment that we had a plum tree in our garden in when I lived in Egham, which had a lot of green fly, and that caused the honeydew. We saw white letter hair streaks on that. There were elm nearby, but they went for the honeydew on our plum tree.
I think any tree which is glistening with honeydew is probably a good tree to look for. I've used that successfully with purple hair streaks as well, looking for oak trees that are just glistening because they're covered in honeydew. They attract the hair streaks.
They occasionally they don't nectar a lot in the trees, but they do like lime. If the lime is flowering, then they quite often like a lime tree next to the elm.
John, you've got your hand up. Do you want to just unmute and then?
Yeah, I really enjoyed that talk. Thank you very much. A couple of things. One is like Horsenden Hill. I went there with my family a few years ago, and the ranger showed us some slow worms. It was the first time I've ever seen slow worms, so that was really nice. But this is so new to me, all this butterflies. I first heard about this group in the with the butterfly challenge last year, and I thought it'd be great because my wife is in a care home, and I thought it'd be great to get involved in that. They could all do it together. And anyway, my question is, like, I put my name in for doing some surveys of some local meadows with this group, and I'm a bit nervous because I've never done it. And how do you get to recognise the butterflies? I mean, I know they're going to give us some training, but how do you recognise them? Have you got a book or something, or do you're just naturally good at knowing?
No, not at all. Like, I started exactly where you are now, with not knowing, feeling like I didn't know any, and then started with my local transect on Streatham Common. And I don't know if you've seen the Field Studies Council guides. Have you seen?
No.
Well, let me get. I've just got one in my back here. I'll just show you. So these guides here are they're about £2 or £3 from the Field Studies Council, and they've got all the butterfly species on them, and they're just really, rather than kind of carting a book around with you, they're just really handy to have in a bag, easy to carry, and they're just a really good kind of frame of reference. And just, I think probably don't worry, like don't worry about being able to identify them all, because this can also feel a bit overwhelming to start with, and thinking there's so many that look exactly the same when you look at the skippers or the whites, and like don't worry about that to start with. You'll get to kind of recognize, like the more practice, the more you go out, then you'll get to sort of recognize which white it is or which skipper it is. And even like really experienced people, like, there'll still be lots of times where I'm like, I don't know, that was a white butterfly, I've got no idea what it was, or that was a skipper of some sort. So don't worry, like the best thing is just to get started. So yeah, well done you for volunteering out there.
I mean, I would add, we run a whole series of public butterfly walks during the summer. We've probably got 50 or so across London and Hertfordshire, and all of those, if you come on one, then you'll be able to get help with identification and get your eye in with different species. We've got I'm pretty sure we'll have some going on at Horsenden Hill over the year. So if you keep all the members will get mailed out a list of all the walks, but you keep an eye on the Herts and Middlesex Butterfly Conservation website. That will tell you what's coming up.
Okay, thanks. Appreciate that. Thanks.
Right, Brian, you want a question?
Yeah, well, where I live, community gardens are very popular. People get a little space in the town, sets aside a little piece of land, and they have 50 plots in there, and people come and plant vegetables and annuals and all sorts of things, and they're very, very popular place for butterfly watching. Do you have such a thing there? I mean, did you, Anna, did you go to any like just gardens that had a lot of annuals in them? Because the annuals can attract many butterflies that aren't attracted to the perennials.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that was one of the green space that I didn't visit any allotments. Most of the allotments in London are closed, like you can't just walk into them, unfortunately. They're all sort of locked off. It's only for people who have an allotment on there who can get into them. It was tempting to do some breaking and entering to go and have a look, because you can get some really nice sightings. Also, like, I don't have a garden, I know that there's so much garden space within London, but yes, short of kind of hopping over walls, which would be tempting. I didn't, but it's a good point that there's lots of those kind of green spaces that I didn't see. I think there is fair to say there are a few community gardens in London, but they, as all these spaces, they've got huge pressures on them for all sorts of uses, and then they're not all designed with butterflies in mind. But there's one we've been working on through the Big City Butterflies project which I think's opened recently at Paddington in Norfolk Square, which would be a good one to visit if anyone's in that area.
It's what the butterflies think. It's not what we think. If they think it's great, maybe butterfly conservation should reach out to the few of these places and say, hey, look at me, I'm a member of butterfly conservation, here's my badge, here's my card, and it's been decided that it's okay for me to walk through here. I'm not going to. Well,
if you'd like to come and join our Big City Butterflies talk in a few weeks' time, you'll find out that's exactly what we've been doing through London, through the staff we've got working on that project. But yeah, there's a lot of effort going into trying to improve management and conservation in parks and all sorts of public spaces throughout inner London.
Yeah.
Anyone else got a question? Conscious I can't see everybody on the screen, so if you have, unmute yourself and ask. No, I think we're done. So, Anna, thanks ever so much for your time. It must have been a really fun project to work on, and you made it very entertaining for us as well. So thank you for coming and speaking to us. And we'll look forward to hearing from you again and on the 8th of March when we talk about the Brilliant Butterflies project. So we're certainly getting good value from you this year. Our next talk is going to be on Wednesday, the 2nd of February, and Roger Gibbons will be talking to us about butterflies of France, which all Roger talks are always fascinating, and lots of top quality photographs. So I hope some of you at least can join us for that. But until then, cheerio, and thanks very much
you,
for
Anna.
coming.
Very much.
All right.
Anna, very good.
Thank you.
That was the
Thanks,
best.
Anna. Bye-bye.
Cheerio.
I love that.
Really
I love that, Anna.
inspiring.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
You.
Night.
Thanks all.
They should all be that good.
Bye.